Hello everyone, it's the introverted astrologer here, and I'm very pleased to be back with my take on the UK's emerging political leaders. I had promised you that I'd have a look at Ben Habib of Advance UK, and I'd also like to include Zach Polanski of the Green Party. Now, these political videos do naturally generate a lot of comments and opinions, and that is great. We're all entitled to our opinions, and I must say again, thank you for not falling out with each other in the process. You have been so polite. And an even bigger thank you to those of you who are unfailingly positive and welcoming to my videos. You know who you are, and I'm so appreciative of your support. Thank you. Now, as I've explained before, I'm honest and I lean to the political left, but I want to give an impartial account across all shades of the political spectrum, and I have no problem with acknowledging all of your comments, regardless of whether they coincide with my own views or not. I'd just like to get to the truth of the matter. And so last week we looked at the few years ahead for Keir Starmer, for Nigel Farage, and also for Kemi Badenoch of the Conservative Party. But particularly in the case of Keir Starmer, we could see that Uranus was already shaking up his chart, and that his leadership is going to come under very intense pressure as we move through 2027. I'll put the link for that video in the description box below. The pressure is so immense on him during 2027 that I very much doubt he will still be Prime Minister by the time we get to the next election. But how about the fresh energy which is now shaking up the UK's political landscape? On Saturday, just a couple of days ago, we had an extremely well-attended political rally. Well over 100,000 people attended London for the Unite the Kingdom rally, which was led by Tommy Robinson. This is a very good turnout in the UK, and Tommy Robinson has joined Ben Habib in the political movement called Advance UK. This movement is registered with Companies House, but it isn't yet registered with the Electoral Commission. That's a job in hand. Habib started this party after leaving Reform UK, and the membership of this party has escalated exponentially since Tommy Robinson signed up to it too. The Green Party, in their own way, are becoming stronger, with surprises at local elections, and its new leader, Zach, is getting a lot of media attention too. So in today's video, we'll have a look at the chart of Zach Polanski and of Ben Habib. We'll have a quick look at the relationship chart between Ben Habib and Nigel Farage to see if we can gain any clues as to why it came to such an ugly end. And I think it would also be wise to look at the relationship chart between Ben Habib and Tommy Robinson, because this is going to be an important relationship. And I'll end with a conversation I had with ChatGPT. I was intrigued about the coming pressures that I could see in 2027 and further onwards, and I wondered what ChatGPT would make of this. Its answers will surprise you. So let's start here with the birth chart of Zach Polanski, who was recently elected the leader of the Green Party. We have no idea at what point in the day he was born, so this is set for noon. The moon, incidentally, will be in Taurus regardless of what time of day he was born. Zach's pursuit of the leadership role did lead to a few ruffled feathers and some surprise. It has actually been described in the press as being a hostile bid to become leader, and that explains something that I can see in his chart now, but we'll come to that in a minute. My first impressions are that we have somebody who's quite a strong character here, because we have so much fixed and cardinal energy in this chart. So Zach is very good at taking the initiative, at leadership roles. But there's also the staying power and the organisational skills there to follow a project through. This moon, his Saturn and that Mars are all in the signs of their exaltation, where they are said to function very well, very easily. And I also picked up that all the planets in his chart, apart from Chiron, are moving much faster than usual, so that gives them added strength too. This Sun-Venus is a very tight conjunction. It may even well be a true cazimi, i.e. within 16 minutes of orb. When a planet is very tightly placed with the Sun, it's said to be in the heart of the Sun, and it really intensifies its properties. And so in Zach's case, we could see great charm, creativity, someone who found it easy to express themselves in very loving and affectionate ways which are well received. It's as though those Venusian qualities are placed in the spotlight. So although we will have the great resilience and tenacity of Scorpio, it will be expressed in the most charming ways. Keir Starmer too could well have a Sun-Pluto cazimi, and this would mean in his case that his Pluto qualities came across very strongly. We do have some small overlap with the chart of Zara Sultana, the MP who's teamed up with Jeremy Corbyn, because she too had this great dollop of planets in Scorpio and that Capricorn Mars. Another interesting feature of this chart is the way the planets are distributed around it. So we have many things clustered across these three signs, and the moon opposes these placements from the other side of his chart. This is a bucket-shaped chart, with the moon being the handle. And so we could consider that all these different energies here are expressed through the handle, the moon. And so this too is pointing to a great deal of charm, stability. The moon in Taurus is exalted. It can be grounded, reliable, loyal. And because the moon represents our emotions, Zach might find it easier to be emotionally tuned in to his environment. I do notice that he seems very engaging with members of the public and has a very confident, easy manner. I'm not a Green Party member personally, but I can understand his easy appeal. I did notice that he was having a couple of transits to his Mars at the moment. We're aware that Saturn and Neptune became almost precisely exact in the first degree or so of Aries recently, and these are the transits by square to his natal Mars. Those aren't necessarily easy transits, and it does explain a little about his campaign to become leader, which has been very intense over the last few months. And so there's been this great drive and tension because these are squares, and possibly feelings of frustration or anger, hopelessness at times, on and off from about April 2025 onwards. So conflicting feelings certainly, but what we're really interested in is this. Will Zach be helped by the transits he could experience between now and the next UK election? This election must be held by August of 2029. We're aware that 2027 is looking rather ropey, but it won't necessarily trigger an election. So there are a few things that we can consider for Zach, like the transits. I was particularly mindful of Uranus, which is causing a fair bit of disruption to politicians at the moment, and is going to play a key role in the charts of Keir Starmer, Nigel Farage. When Uranus brings change, it can do it in such sudden, unexpected and shocking ways that jolt us into awareness, and we're left to deal with what is often a new truth. Uranus can be about freedom, about independence. It can awaken us to new revelations or ways of living that force us to be true to ourselves. Zach will actually escape from the more disruptive elements of Uranus, apart from an opposition to his natal Uranus, which will first become exact around June or July next year, 2026. So there may be some unexpected surprises here. He might need to adjust to sudden change or potentially make an important decision about independence and freedom and staying true to himself. And so perhaps we'll see some old sensitivities reignited, issues around control and communication. So 2026 will contain some tests, but I seriously doubt they will be of the magnitude that will derail his campaign to grow in public popularity. Once Neptune has cleared away from his Mars, it will bring very little bother to Zach over the next few years. However, Pluto is a different matter, and this is because Pluto is moving through the fixed sign of Aquarius, and so it will, in time, square with Zach's natal Sun-Venus conjunction. What time range are we looking at? Probably not until early 2029. But because we don't have an exact birth time for Zach, he might well start experiencing certain niggles even in 2028. And so the issues that could come up now might well relate to power and control. There might be very clear signs that we need to change and transform, and yet we could well resist going into such change. Our relationships, our finances, our self-worth, and what we see as beautiful, all of these will come under pressure. Something that is going to bring Zach some difficulty is transiting Saturn. Saturn is going to become increasingly important. It will reach around 28 degrees of Aries in August of 2027. This is around the time frame when Keir Starmer starts running into serious difficulties. And so it will be hitting these parts of Zach's chart: his own Saturn, his Pluto and his Mercury. And so in this case, how Zach is planning for the future, the way he's communicating this to people, the strategies that he has been using to express his vision for the future, these are going to come under tests, reality checks. We might find that the world around us is offering a great deal of resistance to how we've previously been operating. And this resistance might mean that we have to work super hard and really firm up on the strategies that we're using. But this Saturn is going to move into Taurus in April of 2028. And at this point, we'll probably be on alert for an election date. Now, from the position of Taurus, Saturn is going to oppose that Sun and that Venus in what will be quite a lengthy transit, one that isn't out of the way until around March of 2029. We could find those reality checks on our relationships and our finances, on our sense of self-esteem or self-worth. I'm very mindful that because this is a transit which will go into 29 too, that it could well be overlapping with the square transit that we're expecting from Pluto to his exact same points, that Sun-Venus conjunction. So a lot of strain here. Because the tension from Saturn is by opposition, we could well experience tests and reality checks that feel as though they are coming externally from our important relationships. We might feel that we need to reevaluate under pressure. There could be feelings of rejection or loneliness, and we might need to make important decisions that make us unhappy. And so if the election isn't held until, say, July or August of 2029, then the pressure from Saturn will have abated by then. I can also see that from Zach's progressed Sun, it's currently at 23 degrees of Sagittarius, but by the time we move to 2029, it will be roughly in the area of 26, 27 Sagittarius, and so it will start forming some very positive, steadying sextiles with his own natal Saturn Pluto, and that's helpful. There's also a solar arc aspect which becomes exact around that time, and this is of solar arc Mars falling on his Jupiter, so another auspicious sign of success or triumph in some area of Zach's life. I can't tell you much more than that without that accurate birth time. And at this point in time, I don't think the polls would be hinting at an election win for the Green Party. But our politics is changing very swiftly. And here we have the chart of Ben Habib. This is another one where we just don't have the exact birth time, and so we've got a chart set up for 12 noon. Bear in mind that the lack of ascendant and midheaven does restrict my ability to make reliable forecasts, but there is a lot more that we can pick up by looking at the striking characteristics of this chart. Now, as you might know, Ben Habib was the former deputy leader of Nigel Farage and the Reform UK movement. He was got rid of by Farage back in 2024, and so Habib has gone on to set up Advance with the long-term vision that this could be an alternative party. Habib pledged to donate 100,000 of his own money to the party once it reached membership of 30,000. I believe they've already exceeded 30,000 quite recently, and I think the fact that Tommy Robinson has joined it is going to boost figures tremendously. Now we have an interesting chart here. It's a very mutable chart because we've got this big emphasis on the signs of Gemini, Virgo and Pisces. This moon might be in Virgo, but it may also be in early Libra if Habib was born later in the day. Nonetheless, we can pick up these very tight connections between Mercury and Jupiter. We have the Sun and Node nearby, and this Uranus and Pluto. This is quite intense. Mercury is also important because it's moving very quickly, and it is also in its own sign, and it's the dispositor of many of these planets because it rules Virgo too. So this Mercury is very important. It is also very well connected in the declinations too because it's parallel with his Sun, Jupiter and the Node, all within roughly a degree. And so I would expect somebody very intelligent, very truth-seeking, very original, someone who might get flashes of insight at such speed that the rest of us can't keep up. There could be some stress with this because we do have squares, but Ben Habib's special strengths are largely going to lie in the area of this great intelligence with a drive to achieve possibly social reforms or societal improvements. All this mutable energy will give him a knack for communication and interaction with other people. Habib is going to bring to the table all this versatility, curiosity, the ability to adjust, assimilate and communicate constantly, because we know that he has so much around the 10-degree mark of Gemini. How is Uranus going to affect him over the coming years? Now, Uranus is going to reach the area of this Jupiter-Mercury potentially later in 2027 if he was born early in the morning. If he was born much later in the day, then say partway through 2028, and there will be the simultaneous square to its own position and to Pluto too sometime during 2028. So these are going to be quite big years for Habib. And Uranus will reconnect with these positions again around June, July of 2029. And so you can see we're in potential election territory now. And with Uranus having such a strong impact on his chart, he's going to have to shift and adjust with some very rapidly changing dynamics. Some of these may feel somewhat stressful because Uranus will also be squaring its own position. Think for a moment about Keir Starmer, who is currently going through Uranus squaring its own position. It has brought some very unwelcome shocks, and I'm thinking of Angela Rayner and Peter Mandelson. There may still be a bit more to come in the next few weeks. In Habib's case, Uranus will be making this contact by conjunction as well as square, going over a very highly knit together part of his chart. This will be such a strong injection of electricity, lightning bolts, the need to suddenly and swiftly adjust to new facts or changes. And because Jupiter's involved too, some of these changes may actually be very welcome. There could be news around this time which changes everything. Lucky breaks, increased freedom, vivid and startling new ways of thinking and communicating with people. These are all possible. So 2028 certainly is a time to look out for this. He is having a Neptune square transit to his Venus at present, one that will probably clear away by next year. And this can bring in some very dreamy and possibly unrealistic experiences around the relationships we're forming. And we can't rule out that Neptune may also be transiting by opposition to his moon. But these are not things that are going to play prominently as we tick down into, say, 2027 and 2028. In fact, Neptune may well be offering some helpful energy by sextile to his Jupiter and his Mercury as we move further towards 2029. These could well manifest as opportunities, not life changes, but nonetheless helpful. It looks very exciting for Ben Habib, and we'll have to see which individuals that Advance UK puts forward for the next general election, because at the moment they have no MPs, but a lot can change very quickly, as we've been seeing. I thought we'd have a quick look at the composite charts between Ben Habib and Nigel Farage, and also, very important for the future, between Tommy Robinson and Ben Habib. We're going to have to disregard the angles and houses in this chart, because although we've got Nigel Farage's birth time, we don't have one for Habib. Now, the composite chart isn't the same as synastry. It's a chart which is based on the midpoints between the two people's respective planets, and it says something about the relationship itself, its trajectory, its qualities, as though it was a separate entity to the two people themselves. And there are a couple of things that we can pick up very quickly. We have a lot of warmth, a lot of optimism. This relationship helps us grow in very positive ways. However, we do have a great deal of Neptune, particularly in a business or political type relationship. Neptune is not helpful because we need to be realistic and have a good grasp of what the relationship is about, what each other's roles are, etc. Neptune is very much blurring this, and at best we can possibly be looking at saviour, victim type energies, but we can also at worst be looking at downright dishonesty. These men were both born not too far apart from each other, and so we have that dynamic that is so common to people born in the 60s, but in their case this Uranus is very tightly opposed with this Saturn, and this opposition can be quite difficult to manage in a relationship unless there is a great deal of self-awareness and honesty, because the tensions mount up very quickly like a pressure cooker, and ultimately any difficulties in the relationship can result in it breaking down with great speed, and so hasty and acrimonious departures are very possible. Pluto is also involved in this, and so slow underground pressures could mount, and unless both parties are able to be more open with each other, the relationship might not be able to accommodate the different changes that the two people experience as they mature. And again, we can have a letting off of the steam with great emotion because it has been allowed to build within for so long. There is the possibility for a power dynamic too, of course, because Pluto is square with Venus quite closely. I wouldn't consider this chart ideal for a business relationship. Because of these pressures, and because there is so much Neptune involved, the Mars in this chart is not particularly well integrated with the other planets. And Mars in a relationship is telling us a lot about ego drives, about how the relationship allows both men to express their own ego energies. And in this case, there is so little integration that we could say the relationship would struggle to allow both men the healthy self-expression of their respective ego drives. Will Habib's relationship with Tommy Robinson break down with similar speed? Not necessarily, but there are some weaknesses to it. I should tell you, by the way, that we do know Tommy Robinson's birth time now, but because we don't know Ben Habib's, we need to be mindful that the moon could be, give or take, around 3 degrees each way, and that the angles and the houses aren't relevant. I think this Sun-Mercury will be excellent for what will be a working political relationship. And so the emphasis on outward communication, the ability to verbalise about the working relationship, to have similar ways of thinking and communicating, to get each other's communication style, or at least to think that they get it most of the time. That is possible. I say to think that they get each other's communication style because we do again have a bit much Neptune. And so there is that potential for confusion, for idealising, for not seeing the full picture clearly, and even downright dishonesty, distortion of facts, a twisting of the truth. There is this danger here too, because we can see that Saturn is involved by trine. There could be some longevity here, and there could be that more realistic and grounded ability to look at things too. So it's not a perfect relationship, but it certainly has saving graces. Moreover, I think both men will be able to express their ego energies within the relationship in a relatively easy, creative way. It will have room for that. This isn't necessarily going to be a relationship which requires the men to interact at a very emotional level with each other. And that is one of the relationship's weaknesses. I don't think they will get each other emotionally, and there is a danger that old, buried or more difficult emotions will be aroused. This would be quite difficult if it was a personal love relationship. But all things being equal, I think the biggest danger in this relationship is going to be that the two men are as transparent and truthful with each other as possible. Now, I was playing around in ChatGPT recently, and I've noticed it has come along leaps and bounds over a couple of years. And I'd asked it to take a look at recent general elections and to identify which years would be the most likely for the next election. And initially my eyes boggled because there you can see 2027 early election potential. And I am seeing that 2027 is a pivotal year. But I looked closer and we're still coming up with many errors in ChatGPT. It was using the same chart as me, which is the Great Britain Union chart, certainly a very popular chart for astrologers. But if you look at the reasons why ChatGPT finds this a likely year, it seems to focus very strongly on the UK Sun and Moon in the Union chart. The Sun tells us a lot about very important people, the figureheads of the country, and the Moon is telling us about the people themselves, the state of democracy in the country. And ChatGPT has been trying to establish which transits from the social and outer planets are going to be in force during particular years. And at times where there is an emphasis on the Sun or Moon, it then questions whether they could be likely election years. However, its interpretation of transits is still leaving a lot to be desired. So, for example, it is telling us that 2027 is very likely because Saturn will square the UK Sun at that time. However, Saturn actually will be in the area of Aries next year, when it will begin an ongoing square transit to the UK's sun. It may even be that ChatGPT gets easily confused between planetary positions using Vedic astrology versus those in Western astrology, because there is some 24 degrees of difference between them. However, I had made it clear that I was using Western astrology, so that was somewhat disappointing. And finally, it identifies that Uranus in Gemini will trine the UK moon at 19 degrees of Cancer. And clearly that isn't right too. So we still have these errors in ChatGPT. Incidentally, by 2029, transiting Neptune will have genuinely reached around 11 degrees of Aries before turning retrograde, and so certainly this will be a big pressure on authority structures and leaders. We could consider that there will be confusion or undermining of some kind, and I'll look at it closer to the time. I do still find, incidentally, that if I input my own birth date and ask ChatGPT to give me a loose forecast for the coming years, it still has a long way to go on accuracy. There is a great deal of inaccuracy around moon sign, around the positions of progressed planets, so much so that the results are thoroughly unreliable. I don't know if any of you have tried experimenting with astrology forecasts, but take it with a pinch of salt if you do. I hope that helped. Keep faith, everybody, and God bless you and your families.